I feel we're very close to a Mecca moment.
All you young people got your passports?
For moderator-elect, you have called Phyllis Nolan Carter.
There are many reasons for letting the Church of Brethren be born in Korea.
Join me in wishing God's blessing and strength to these persons called by their peers.
Now comes the time, brothers and sisters, for us to gather and to share together in the 204th recorded annual conference of the Church of the Brethren.
Annual Conference in Milwaukee may be best remembered as the place where the Brethren returned to the business of planting churches overseas. After decades of working ecumenically or in partnership with other churches, delegates voted this year to expand the Brethren witness with new churches in both Korea and the Dominican Republic. The Korean issue was whether to work with the existing Korean Evangelical Church, as recommended by the General Board, or begin a new Brethren presence.
For some of us, we've been concerned for a long time about the lack of involvement, active involvement in doing mission work.
We know that the Church of the Brethren has significant gifts to share in Korea. We have a unique believer's view of the gospel, and we believe that it can be shared through some association and work through the Korean Evangelical Church, which is already there.
But John Park, who pastors a Korean Church of the Brethren congregation in Los Angeles, advocated a specific Brethren presence.
I wish to support this movement of Church of Brethren strongly.
When you tell me I cannot share the church I love with my own family and friends who happen to live in Korea,
if a relationship with the Korean Evangelical Church is pursued, it will seriously jeopardize the development and growth of Korean Brethren ministry in the United States.
The debate ended when Jim Meyer moved to begin the process of planting Brethren congregations in Korea while still maintaining a respectful attitude toward the existing Christian bodies there.
And I urge us to break the back of our bashfulness and go with God.
All those in favor of the motion, would you raise your right hand? And those opposed, same sign. The motion has carried.
The other mission question was far less controversial. Delegates voted overwhelmingly to support church planting efforts in the Dominican Republic, already begun by brethren from Puerto Rico. One of the leaders in that effort, Jorge Toledo, shared with the delegates the work of the Puerto Rican Brethren and his goal of congregations in the small, isolated villages of the Dominican Republic. Delegates at Milwaukee also passed a statement on deaf ministry, which calls for the church to treat the deaf community as a distinct ethnic group with separate ministries for deaf people and the creation of a deaf ministry task force. Delegates also approved a query calling for more staff time and resources on the denominational level directed toward young adults. They also created a committee to study how the church can better respond to the needs of Black Americans, especially those in urban areas.
You don't have to be black, or you don't have to have black persons in your congregation to be at work on some of the issues that affect the conditions of life for blacks in this country.
Hayes is among those who will study that issue and report to next year's conference. There was also this from Andy and Terry Murray.
There'll be no lines for the brethren at the microphones in heaven. You can step right up and speak right up in the sweet by and by. There'll be no waiting for the floor when we reach that other shore. At that great annual meeting, your moments won't be fleeting. You can second an emotion without a delay. You can make 600 amendments a day. No delegate to that glorious state will ever have a little moment to wait to say what he or she must say at that great annual meeting in the sky. Thank you.
During the week, there were greetings from special visitors. Leaders of EYN, the Church of the Brethren in Nigeria, attended, along with the President-elect of the National Council of Churches, Syngman Rhee. Delegates also learned that the Bethany Theological Seminary property is now officially for sale. The seminary board decided to relocate the seminary from its current home in Oak Brook, Illinois.
That motion in board meeting this week was passed by a unanimous vote.
Among the options are an affiliation with another seminary or rebuilding at another location. Other updates centered on the new hymnal being developed with the Mennonites.
We're planning to have a beautiful new hymnal out in your hands at annual conference on 1992.
Another update came from the committee looking into the structure of the denomination. Members are still gathering information and sought advice during this session at conference. Their report is due next year, as is a report by this study committee on peace issues. Both committees briefed the delegates on their progress. While the business was going on, the youth of the church were busy. Children in grades 1 through 5 were learning pottery making, tie-dyeing, crafts, even cooking.
We were able to learn some Spanish, and then we could make banners, and then you can make musical instruments like wood blocks and flutes. You can choose what you want to do, and you don't have to do something boring if you don't want to do it.
And after sitting for a while, there was aerobic exercise to burn off that extra energy. Junior high activities included a walk to the nearby museum. The senior high youth also had a week full of activity. There was recreation, but there was also Bible study, singing, updates on National Youth Conference, and a day in the Milwaukee community for a work project. Youth also heard from former BBSer Jennifer Casolo, who worked for peace and understanding in El Salvador before the military government there accused her of hiding arms, a charge which was later dropped. Casolo also shared with the conference during the report of the General Board program of the denomination. The theme was Called to the Border, and one by one, participants passed through a guard post on their way to the microphone to talk about the borders they have crossed in their lives. For Chu Min, it was a physical border between her native China and this country where she's a student at Bethany Seminary. For Joyce McFadden, who described herself as a recovering alcoholic, the border was to health and wholeness.
Sister Anna Mao used to assure me that the dark hours of the soul, even the depressions, were a trusted gift from God. I understand that now. I'm now moving to a spot of being grateful that God trusted me enough to allow me to become a part of the community of faith called the Church of the Brethren.
For a little boy on a tractor, the border was the future and the hope that we would take care of God's creation. For the choir from First Church in Chicago, the border was the city, where brethren are celebrating 100 years of involvement. For Jennifer Casolo, the border was El Salvador, and identifying with the poor and oppressed.
That's a pretty dangerous place. Don't you think you're a little, undersized to go to a place like that?
The people who are really small are those without courage for their convictions.
Okay, we may just have more questions for you later, Ms. Casolo.
Suffering is not the worst thing you can do. Being cruel is a lot worse. But being silent before the cruelty is even worse. As a nation, we are bringing death to the least of our brothers. We are making life impossible. Through war and through economic exploitation. As people of faith, we are called to that border. You don't have to go to El Salvador, but you have to take the same risks. You have to be the persecuted church in order to be the resurrected church.
Other borders the report showed included the Brethren partnership with churches in Cuba and Nicaragua, and a January work camp in Nicaragua, along with a seminary graduation for our partner church there. Being called to the border for others meant traveling to St. Croix to help rebuild from Hurricane Hugo. or traveling from Nigeria to the Mount Wilson congregation in Pennsylvania, where David Malafa served a 4-month exchange pastorate. The report concluded with a summation of the borders that brethren cross as we seek to follow God's calling, borders that are as much spiritual as they are geographic or cultural, borders that are crossed with the confidence that as we go, God goes with us. Conference days began with Bible study, several of them in English, but also sessions in Korean and Spanish. And prior to each business session, Judith Kipp or T. Wayne Raymond led the conference delegates through the biblical passages related to the theme Living in Obedience to God's Calling. That's become a tradition at conference, as is the annual blood drive. Brethren donated 356 pints of blood for the Milwaukee Blood Bank. Other traditions included the quilt auction, sponsored by the Association for the Arts, which raised almost $19,000 for hunger through the sale of artwork, including quilts with blocks brought to conference by congregations and stitched together during the week. A wall hanging was presented to Moderator Curtis Dubble, called The Road to Milwaukee. And there was a Passing on the Promise chicken wandering through the conference this year, calling attention to the evangelistic efforts that are hatching from Passing on the Promise. Messenger introduced a new line of T-shirts, and by guessing the number of M&Ms in this jar, conference goers could win one. There were also more than 100 booths and exhibits, including one by Serve, which attracted shoppers of all ages. Also, the Brethren Press bookstore offered T-shirts of their own, other items, and, of course, books. And when business sessions were completed, the Brethren hit the streets looking for something to eat. But with the conference food traditionally more expensive than the local fast food restaurants, the Brethren tradition of frugality prevailed, especially at this nearby Wendy's restaurant, which actually ran out of food one day because of overwhelming demand from conference goers. When nightfall came, the Brethren scurried to more than 90 different insight sessions, a session on humor with Pat Hellman, one by Brethren songwriter Linda Williams and her songs on conflict resolution. The Brethren College presidents held a forum, as did those working on the new mission in the Dominican Republic. And there was an Andy and Terry Murray concert. Andy Murray hosted a 2-cent a meal concert Saturday night to raise awareness of the hunger problem in the Sudan and homelessness in the U.S. A Phil Grout production on Sudan was shown. 2 Sudanese students shared about the situation in their country, and musicians and entertainers shared some of their talents.
Feed us with hope, feed us with loving, feed us with joy, feed us with peace.
Early evening concerts featured the Elizabethtown Men's Chorus, the Manchester College A Cappella Choir, and the New Horizons Youth Choir from First Church in Chicago. Worship services centered on the theme of living in obedience to God's calling. Tuesday night speaker was Bethany Seminary professor Murray Wagner. Wednesdays was Dina Pence France, pastor of a Mennonite Brethren congregation in Fresno, California. On Thursday, the conference heard from the pastor of the Panther Creek congregation in Illinois, Annette Satvedi, who likened following God with the advice given to him in Nigeria about how to drive in a dust storm.
He replied, "Go forth till you see. The moment you reach there, you shall see further." Go forth till you see. The moment you reach there, you shall see further. That's God's way too. It was during the time of Abraham and Sarah. It was during the time of Jesus. It was during the time of Paul and apostles. It was during the time of Alexander Mack, Christian Hope, Wilbur Stover, Stover Culp. And it is also now.
Thursday night session featured a commissioning service for 19 Brethren volunteer service workers just prior to their beginning their assignments. More than half of the volunteers in this unit are Brethren, and all attended events during the conference. On Friday, Joanne Dieter, executive of Parish Ministries Commission, delivered her scripture as a biblical woman describing Jesus.
It wasn't just the words he said. There was something else. There was a power in his presence. We came from many diverse backgrounds, those of us who were attracted to him, and we came to him for many different reasons. But somehow or other, Jesus became the center of our lives.
Saturday's worship service featured a drama written by Deanna Brown and Anita Smith Buckwalter, pastors in Michigan. It presented the story of Ruth and mixed contemporary dialogue with the Old Testament story. On Sunday, moderator Curtis Dubble offered a challenge to the audience.
What do you presently think about your living in obedience to God's calling in Christ Jesus? In the story of the two sons, the father loved both of the sons. The one that said, "I will," but didn't, and the one who said, "I will not," and went. The son who in the end obeyed was the one who connected with the will and intention of the Father.
Later came the consecration service for moderator-elect Phyllis Carter and some closing comments by the outgoing moderator.
Anna Mary and I have thought during the past 2 years that this was a type of forced BVS by vote. We are happy to announce to you that, the Lord willing, in 1992 we will enter Brethren Volunteer Service by choice.
At that point, the moderatorship was transferred to Phil Stone, who will preside over the 1991 annual conference in Portland. Annual conference, a place of fellowship, of decision-making, of launching new ventures in mission and ministry. It's a time of examination, a time of renewal and recommitment to living in obedience to God's calling.